Good morning. I wanted to come on here to say a few things. I have so much to say. I barely even know where to start, but I'm just going to start this up and see where it goes because I feel like a few things need to be said. There needs to be a little bit of grounding to the current energy because it's very high up in the chest, quite a lot of heart palpitations, anxiety, and fear. And it's like a whirlwind, and the more that people feed into it, the faster it goes, and the more that it turns, the more that it dismantles and it takes down. And there's quite a lot of unnecessary suffering, but who's to say that it's not necessary when it comes to the bigger picture of giant shifts underway? But at the same time, I feel like there's some common truths and core grounds that I want to come back to and shed some light on, because it's precisely in times like these, and don't think that this has not happened before. History repeats itself. It repeats itself. Things have been scripted and they happen again. And each time we're a little bit more aware, but we'll get back to that. Each time that this happens, the similar types of things go down. People get hurt. Freedoms are lost. We are confused. We go through growth pangs to get to a different state of consciousness. But there are certain core truths that I feel at this time feel like they have to come through, especially because while we're all caught up in left and right opinions about the matter and so-called authority figures in the mass media and what people believe this is about based on what their programming has led them to understand about it, we are kind of missing the picture. Because in being caught up and looking at those things from whatever perspectives we're looking at them, we miss core truths. There are certain things that we miss out on and don't ever come to the forefront because we're being distracted by something else. And primarily one of those things is even how disease operates, what it even is, how it works, how the human body works. This is a very deep subject, and perhaps it is actually time for this to come forwards, given that it's not been in the public eye for so long, for good reason. The reason information has not been shared truthfully and accurately and openly is because there is an agenda to stop this information from being shared. So the truth will come out regardless, and it's just important for us to understand that what we think is happening is not what we think is happening. But I'll start by saying that I can feel through the suffering of every human being happening on this planet at this time right now. There is so much fear. There is so much pain. People are dying. So many things are changing, and it is unprecedented ground. We do not know what the hell to do. We don't know what to believe and what to turn to. But I want to start with some common truths over here, which are primarily the mass media is lying. Period. Let's just start with that. It's lying. How do we know this? Well, we can go into history and look at how that works. We can look into what are the things that they are doing and have been doing. What are the companies that own them? The freedom that we think that we have is an illusion of choice. It's an illusion of freedom. You have multiple channels that you can choose from, yeah, but they're all owned by like top 4 ones. Okay, so there you go. The narrative is already skewed according to who owns those shares. And all the information that we have about how the media operates to begin with. You can make something look like anything you want it to. It's really simple. It's just take it from a certain angle and then it looks that way. So that's one common truth that we want to put out there because not enough people know about this apparently. Media is lying. The second thing that we want to talk about is the programming of the mind. This is a very important aspect because we don't seem to be aware of the fact that we have been deeply traumatized, programmed, and mind controlled for thousands of years. This is an important factor to bring into this because it means that a lot of the things that we believe to be true may not be true. A lot of the things that we think are a certain way might not be a certain way. And when people begin to divide and argue amongst each other about something that they are so full on standing behind, they don't even question where that thing came from. So that is an important factor to bring into this because a lot of the things that we believe to be true about this are programs. And the only way to move forwards into this next level of the awakening is to deprogram the mind, as we have been doing for several years now, but even more strongly now, even more strongly called to look at your beliefs, to look further into things. No one can tell you what the truth is. No one. Not even someone that shares something on their page and seems so sure about it. They can't tell you the truth about anything because there's no one truth. There are many perspectives and many truths. Now, what you are called to do from within the activations encoded within you is to seek those things out. If something intrigues you or seems like it is somewhere that you want to go, you go down that path and you look at it without fear. Cognitive dissonance is going to kick in. Now, cognitive dissonance is where we cannot carry two opposing beliefs within our minds for long enough. One of them is going to fall through. And usually it's the core belief that you had prior that stays because it's really, really strong. So you see evidence in the world of things that are absolutely horrific and we don't want to believe in. And a lot of people just put those blinders on and turn around and walk away. When you hear about a cult of high-ups into pedophilia and how that is all being plastered across the media and normalized in our societies, most of us don't want to hear it. They're just like, no, that's too horrific. We don't want to hear it. Nonetheless, we move on to point 3. It doesn't mean it's not true. Just because there's been a lot of stuff thrown back and forth about what conspiracy theory is or is not, or that people are lying or that they're confused, does not mean that there is not a common thread of truth to a lot of these things. It does not mean that this information is not in fact true or cannot be followed down and looked into. And you're not going to find it on the mass media. So that harkens back to point 1. You're not going to find it just being easily handed over to you and shared out. I mean, it's really interesting to question, why is it that we're not told about man-made diseases? Why on the media are we not talking about people being killed for sharing truth and sharing remedies? Why are we not talking about these mass shootings of pedophilia? Why are we not talking about arrests? Like, it's all controlled. So that's point 1. But at point 3, we come to the fact that there is a common narrative when it comes to some of these so-called conspiracies. There is a deep vein of sadistic psychological control, parasitism on the face of this planet. And at this point now, in order to walk through this portal and get to the other side, you call yourself sovereign. You cut ties with these things. And one of those things is fear. Fear. Why are we afraid? Why are we in a mass panic about something that A, we are being lied to about, B, we don't have the correct information on, and C, there's an agenda behind? See, this fear is fodder, it's food, it's fuel for something greater than us, something different. And we, in order to move forwards into this next step, we understand that this fear needs to go. It needs to go. Because you, in your sovereign little bubble, are free to attach to whatever you want to call into your experience whatever you want to believe whatever you want, to allow something to unfold in the way that you want it to. But it takes awareness. It takes awareness that something is not as it seems, and to follow that little tidbit down the road and see where it takes you and understand what it connects to. Most people are not questioning these narratives, are not looking into them because they have been deeply, deeply traumatized and programmed into not questioning and looking at these things. So it's important to understand that this control that exists is part of an agenda, regardless of whether we want to call it theories or games or not. It's actually here. And one of the things that we can do to most step into our power in this time is to speak your truth. First of all, find it, ask for it, look for it, and then speak it. There is fear around speaking up. There is fear around speaking our truth. This is fact. Why? Because people that have done it in the past have been murdered. They have been people that have been taken out of the game simply for being in an inopportune moment, in an inopportune time, telling somebody something or figuring it out. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and it's not just one thing, but putting it all together can actually make us feel empowered in what we go through, because it means that we no longer need to be afraid about something that's being completely blown out of proportion. And that's just with using critical skills. You can see that, okay, this is the reaction to this is disproportionate to what is actually happening. That's That's number one. Our gut feelings can tell us, okay, something's off. Something is off about this. But then you can start to question, what is it? And I can tell you it's not just one thing. If I told you it was just one thing, then you would know that I was making it up. It's not just one thing. It is a combination of factors. In the same way that nature operates, there's always multiple things that are working together that are interacting from multiple different angles. So in this case, it could be a variety of things that are occurring at the same time. We have to stay vigilant and aware of what is going on. You have to question everything. And if you don't question everything, you see what it is occurring around us, where we thought that there was so many more of us awake at this time, and what we see is actually so many are not. And it's so easy to just twist the public around your finger, tell them what you want, and go down that path. And the fact that most people are not aware of this type of control, that they are not aware that most of this is scripted, that is what's shocking. That is what's scary. At this point, if you ask me what I am scared of at this time, it's not some fabricated virus. And we'll get into that in a second to explain what's actually going on, because it's not to say that people are not sick and people are not dying. But it's not fear of that. It's fear that when something like this happens, anything and everything that you have held to be true or known before falls through the cracks, and you just step forwards and strip away your freedoms completely. They say jump and you say how high. What's scary in this time is to see just how effective it has been, to the point that narratives can be twisted left and right and nobody questions it. But it's important to note here that most people have never been exposed to this. They're not aware of it. And so in your personal life, the role that you can take is to look into these things for yourself, to be a free thinker in that manner. And whatever it is that you find out, you may or may not be able to share it with others and help them. But at the end of the day, being a calm storefront, like just an anchor in the midst of all this panic and fear is only going to serve. It's only going to help. Because with a lot of this information, we can become disgrounded and really fearful. But when you see the full picture of it, you also recognize that it's only fearful when we give it our energy, when we give it our fear, when we believe that it can actually take us out. Now, the reason this is happening is because of how powerful and amazing we are. It's because of what we know and what we can become and who we really are at a soul level. So what you can learn and anchor in at this time is incredibly indispensable. Let's get back to this little bit about the virus in general. So there's a couple that need to be brought to light, and one of them is actually the way that the body operates. That in itself has been completely skewed in the sense that people are not even aware how disease works, how their bodies actually work, and that they can heal them. I have not used prescription medication for the last 7 years. I should be dead now, according to the mass public. I should be dead now, right? Or I'm incredibly healthy or something. I have had incredibly traumatizing and difficult periods of illness concerning autoimmune stuff and all kinds of other things and a lot of poisonings. And I've experienced symptoms. I've had my fair share of illness. I've had my fair share of difficulties. But the common thing that has kept me going this entire time was my awareness and my knowledge that that stuff is poison, that it was clogging up my nervous system. I'm incredibly sensitive. I take this stuff, I can sense it immediately. It leaches nutrients from your body. It messes with your brain. So the basics over here are that the facts of how the human body operates have been completely misrepresented and skewed. When you start to go down the path to try to understand a little bit about how this stuff works, you come across the germ theory, and you realize that this theory trumped a different one and took it over, and it's exactly what's shared throughout everything: media, schools, institutions, hospitals. And it's the theory that predominates. You need to understand that not just because something predominates, it is true. Okay, so this is an important aspect over here. Not just because something is popular, is it therefore true? Not just because it's around, therefore it's true. No. Some of these things are actually that way because they were made to be that way, or that agenda was pushed forwards. And it is interesting to go back and look into how a lot of these institutions first began to share their information to begin with. Let's say in the 1930s, when the Rothschilds actually bought themselves into the American Medical Association and went into schools and went into hospitals and basically said, hey, we'll buy shares into your operation or sponsor you in exchange for you sharing our information and putting some of our people on your board. And there it is, it's bought, it's gone, it's bought out. They then share information that's agreed upon by these institutions themselves, and they have the power of the voting and the power of making big decisions. So that's just one perspective to look at it, that what you think is real might not be real. What you think is true and real information might not be real at all, because there's actually something going on where this information has been skewed and misrepresented. So the way that disease operates, not entirely truthful at all. In fact, you start going into whether viruses are even a thing or not, and you come across a lot of information concerning, okay, the toxicity of cells, when cells are poisoned and they're under duress, like for example, radiation or toxins in the environment. They release sick pieces of code. We might call those viruses, that the human body actually can heal itself. All of this information is not something that is in the mass media. And so what occurs on a mass level is this hysterical reaction of fear towards something from the outside coming onto you and destroying you. The virus itself, let's say it's real, okay? And let's also say that most of these so-called diseases and viruses are man-made. They have patents. Patents, like as in, something in nature could not have a patent, but this can, because it was created and marketed. You can look into several agendas, but Agenda 201, that is Event 201, that was like a simulation that occurred or November of last year. All of this stuff, like once you open your eyes and start looking into it, you find signals and signs of everything, evidence that leads you down wherever you want to go, and you can look at that information for yourself, cross-reference it with your gut, and see where it takes you. But let's say, for the sake of reasoning over here, that this virus is actually man-made, which means that there are actual biological agents in warfare that's occurring against us. And again, history can show you that as you see these repeating factors over and over again. Let's say now that is released onto the people. Okay, that's going to cause a lot of damage. That is going to hurt people because it was specifically designed to do so. But what is another aspect that we need to bring into this? It's also that the multiple factors that are interacting to actually create this crisis. It's not just one thing. It's not just one factor killed off people and it did this, or what they say it did. There's several factors that are interacting, and they include people's lack of awareness of how their body even operates. That's one. Two, the fact that there are comorbidities, which means that there are other illnesses that are occurring at the same time. So there's studies that are being released at this point that say a really high percentage of the people that are dying actually had other things. And do not forget the power of the mind, the power of the placebo. When you believe that you are sick, you die. Okay? That is how strong our beliefs are. So, other comorbidities that are occurring at this time could be other cases of pneumonia, other cases of the flu, other colds. Like all of this information is happening all in tandem. But the fact that the media says it's this, it's suddenly this. Yeah, the fact that the bought out cabals and cartels of drugs and scientific information say it's this, it's this. Is it? I'm sorry, and this is where a lot of people fall off the train, because they're basically like, oh my God, well, how can you doubt what is like the scientific method or the truth of our lives, without ever questioning where that truth came from, without ever questioning how that truth is disseminated and how it operates. I'm all for studying the world around us and recording it. And in fact, there are many real scientists and actual people that have done a lot of work of very high merit that are in the ground right now. They're gone because they were put out of order because they had some information that went against the mainstream. There's a lot to this story, and one live or one post couldn't possibly give you all of it, but it is important and really imperative at this time to actually question things and look into them. This does not mean that we put ourselves in the line of so-called danger, or if we doubt something, therefore we then go out and we rebel about it on the streets. I don't know what it is that we're meant to do, but each person within themselves has the capacity to decide that, has the capacity to look into things, question them, and check them in with themselves, check in with themselves about how that's feeling and what that looks like. So multiple factors are interacting to make this be like reacting in this way. Like, for example, the way that the media is representing it could be completely false. Like, no one's questioning that. It could be completely false. Not that people are dying or not that there's something wrong, but simply the angle that it's being taken from. Because we have to question when something explodes like this, what the hell is the agenda? And if we're not questioning what the hell is the agenda, then we are still in the same pit. Like, just looking at stuff that's happened over and over and over again and just not questioning it at all. I mean, we have to also bring in another factor, like, for example, the 5G towers. 5G is not healthy for humans. It's not healthy for animals. It's not healthy for nature. But are we talking about that? Does the media talk about that in any way? No. Time and time again, it keeps rolling out in different cities. And I don't feel like we consented to this. I remember 3 years ago when I first saw it, I was so overwhelmed and so confused and sad that I had no clue what to do. I didn't know what to do. In fact, it slipped out of my consciousness. It just slipped away. And I just moved on with my life, only to be brought back to this point again and to realize, yes, it's all well and good for us to either be fooled or to think that we can just anchor in the highest possible timeline by just sitting here. But the fact remains that